George, you're back. Good to see you. Although we have just spent the best part of 3 days in Sri Lanka as courtesy of the Barmy Army. Nick Friend and Steve Harmison. So much to talk about. You must be the only person in the world, George, who flew from one cricket ground in Sri Lanka to... Did you go to Edgbaston on days 3 and 4? Yeah. That's crazy. That's how much he loves cricket.
No, it was lovely. It was a joy. All of it was, I mean, it's a long old way. I can't honestly say that Avanti bit was a joy, but all the rest of it was brilliant. How lucky are we to get to go to Dambulla one day and Edgbaston the next? It was brilliant.
The Bishop Fernando fan club, eh?
We will never.
He wasn't brilliant.
We'll probably never be able to say that again. But you're absolutely right. It was great. Loved being back in Dambulla. Very much looking forward to being back at the Oval at the end of the week. But let's head to Taunton, where an incredible game played out. Lots of talking points from that 4 days of action. Tom Banton with his career best. What was that? Was it the fifth highest score in county championship?
I think 370 goes up beyond career best. You're like, I think he'd never faced 200 balls in innings before. I reckon career best is when you like turn 130 into 137.
Yeah.
What?
And you don't get it against universities.
I think when you're five, Am I
underplaying it?
Well, it was the fifth of all time. It was also only the third highest championship score at Taunton, I think. So,
how would you have given it the big up? How would you have described it?
I'd have gone with fifth highest score in the history of a 135-year-old tournament. It's 5 not to be in a winning cause, I think. I think it's amazing. Like the transformation from someone who literally, I think I worked out that he scored more runs on Saturday and Sunday than he did in the 2022 and 2023 seasons for Somerset, or something like it's either 21 on 22 or 22 and 23. But either way, like the transformation from someone who had this reputation as a white ball guy, was struggling to get into the red ball team, could easily have gone the way of a counter teammate of his, Will Smead, and just focused on white ball cricket entirely. And been pretty open about how much he hated cricket for a while as well. And to come back and go, when you never faced 200 balls before, and he suddenly it was 403, wasn't it? Like it's a pretty wild turn of events.
Was he
you're more impressed
than you were
with?
He was dropped on 320.
You're more impressed than you were with Sam North East this time last year. Why was that?
Yeah, that was the worst game of cricket ever played. And it genuinely might have needed a good 13, 14 days for a result if you took declarations out of it. That was Kookaburra, wet ground, awful. Whereas, don't get me wrong, I don't think this was that much. I don't think it was that much less flat in the end at Taunton. But and the manner of it was almost a run of ball. And Sam North East, weirdly, that wasn't the highest score of Sam North East's career. Sam North East has a quadruple 100, doesn't he? He got one for Glamorgan at Leicester, I think, a couple of years beforehand.
So that wasn't his career best.
No, it wasn't his career best. That 335 not out. Do you know the other thing and this will sound ludicrous to say, and I wrote it on what day was it? Sunday on the Cricketer. That it sounds ridiculous to say, but it does put into context Lara again. Like, not that you need to put Brian Lara into context, but 371, and he gets, I can't remember how he's out now. He was caught behind off Tom Hinley, and he walks off. He's 130 short of the. It's the maddest. No one's touching that ever, are they? Like
no,
like it's crazy. Like in the
Lara game, there was other big scores in it. John Morris got double 100 as well. I remember I talked to Steinman Brown about that Lara game, who played in it, and he said it was crazy. They played on one side. I mean, literally 30-yard circle was it was nearly the boundary on one side of Edgbaston. And he said for about 2.5 hours of Lara's innings, he would hit 5 fours to the short side, whether it was on the leg side or the offside, and then hit 3 to the other side. And he said, bowling at him, he felt like he bowled at him. They bowled every ball at Brian Lara for 2 and a bit hours. He just pinched a strike on the last ball of the over by hitting a 3, and then hitting the rest of them for 4s, and he 4s or 6s. And I think that's why 500's a long lot. Well, I'd seen that first up in the morning. It's like, can you get to 500? So that's a big ask. But for me, from just a purely cricketer's point of view, I looked at Tom Banton, and we've seen him closely. Me and Manners had a chat with him in India when he came out. And I hope now, like you mentioned there, Nick, I like a good sort of comeback story. Ben Duckett got a chance early, disappeared for a bit, and he now is. I mean, he's one of my favourite players for England, and he's a mainstay of the England side. I just hope that that little lull in his career, maybe his reflection on where he was and where he can be and what he can be. I just hope this is a kick on for Tom Banton, because I think England might need him, especially in the white ball format. But he might have just thrown his hat in the ring for the red ball format. Go on.
Where would he bat in the Test team, Harmy?
He would have to bat at number 3. I mean, there's nobody else. There's no other spots available. Let's be fair. What I would say in English cricket now, the thing I'm really enjoying about watching, I was going to make the point later on about, I see wicketkeepers now in England batting in the top 6. I think it's brilliant. Ollie Robinson, Young Hurst, he's up there. There's 2 or 3 others that
Ben Folkes bats at 5 and had a great week.
Folkes bats at 5. There's another one. Smith bats higher. There's another batter wicketkeeper in the first division.
James Davis.
James Rue.
Oh no, he didn't keep, to be fair, but he will.
Well, James Rue, of course, keeps.
Somebody else. I mean, somebody else. I've got a brain fade here. That's going. But at the end of the day, I'm wicketkeeper batters batting in the top 6. That's great.
Well,
but
Pops and Pepper, I guess you might be thinking.
Pepper, possibly, yeah. I think it was Pepper. But if you look at it as a batter in first class cricket now, if you want to play for England, you can only bat in the top. Well, you bat number 2, you bat number 3. I think Duckett's cemented in. There's no other place. Root's going nowhere. Brooks going nowhere. Stokes is captain. Smith's, I think, is number 7. Perfect. So if you want to get into the England cricket team, you've got any aspirations, you have got to bat in the top 4 for your county and put a volume of numbers on and say, right, I'm ready to play for England in that number 3 spot if Ollie Pope continues to not score the runs that he hasn't been scoring in recent past.
Fair.
That Banton has to do that, and Banton's just made a case for himself.
There must be a lovely thing. It sounds really ridiculous to say, but like, get 370 in your first year of the season, you can have such a mediocre year from now on and like crawl to 1,000. And
I'm not sure those are the attitudes.
No, but
I think they were 25 years ago.
Yeah, maybe so.
He's halfway to he's halfway to 1,000. He could. I mean, it's no.
Again, the maths isn't great there either.
Yeah. Well, it's nearly halfway to 1,000. It's
like a third, isn't it?
It's beyond halfway to 500.
But like a Hick and Rampakash, they got 1,000 runs before the end of May. If they went and got 300 in the first game, 370 in the first game of the season, they would get Gucci. They would get 2,500 runs. Stalwart of county cricket. Bang, there's 2,500. Bang, if they got off to a start like that. I'm not saying that Tom Banton's going to get 2,500 runs, but it could be the earliest to 1,000 runs in the recent past, with the amount of cricket you've got. Because when you get on a roll, like we all know, you get on a roll of 5 or 6 slow scores, the world's on your shoulders. If you get on a roll where you can't stop scoring runs, and you've got 6 games in 7 weeks or 7 games in 8 weeks, I mean, he could get to 1,200 runs by the first Test match, and then as a selector you're going, hold on, we brought him back into the fold in the winter. Can we ignore him?
He's had an amazing year. If you think back to last September, before he got 100 in that Surrey game before he'd done his ankle, hadn't he? Then he went to the ILT20 and scored 1 million runs. And it's interesting, actually. There are a few guys who went to the ILT20 in county cricketers who've come back and started with really stylish hundreds. I don't think there's necessarily a link there, but Banton went as well as you can possibly do. So I think he was the second top run scorer, and then got the England call up. And so it was flat. And I think Lewis Gregory called it afterwards. I think he called it a bang average wicket. And Worcester's 6 to 11 faced almost 1,000 balls between them on that final day. And actually, they probably wouldn't have got down to 11 had it not been for one extraordinary decision, certainly. But
yeah, I've seen that.
Might be missing another set in it entirely. That was Brett D'Oliveira. I think poor bloke faced 340 balls for his 100, ground it out, and then kicked one away that would have missed 6 stumps and was.
I think the umpire had the M5, M6, M42 in his mind at a crucial time on a motorway logjam and thinking I can beat the traffic here, and because I thought that was a shocker as well.
Well, I was meant to be there.
make
I was
of
meant
the
to be there.
fact that Leach bowled that many overs, 65 overs, and
Archibald 50.
he did, but he's a kid learning his trade.
Yeah.
And I think it would be harsh to expect a lot more of him.
Yeah, but 115 overs from spin.
Right, and none of them, because they'd let Shoaib Bashir go elsewhere. Do they win that game if they played Shoaib? Would be one question. And is Jack Leach going to be looking back with some regret there? Do we see I say this as a Somerset supporter for whom it hurts not having sealed that game, although I was kind of pleased for Worcestershire as well. Have we seen the limitations of what Jack Leach can offer there, maybe?
I don't think so, because actually Leach's biggest strength has been fourth innings, isn't it? When it is spinning, and he took his 500th first class wicket in that innings as well. He honestly, like, I say, I was there on day 3. I was meant to be at Northampton, and just saw the way things were going, and kind of thought if Banton does get 900, it'd be quite cool. So I went there. It was only 27 odd runs, 27 runs that he got. But being there for the day and then watching the way Worcestershire dug in and the way that Somerset had to work, to be fair to Somerset, they went through every field and more. They had 7 catches in front of the wicket. There was absolutely naffle in it, and I think
so should they have declared earlier? I mean, they were out. They declared, I think.
They declared 5. They were
out, right?
They were 516 runs ahead on first innings, but they did give themselves.
Sorry, if you go 200 overs, you 200 overs and you get 9 down.
They gave themselves the best part of 2 days to take 10 wickets with no rain in the forecast against a side that rolled 150 in the first innings. So,
who would you have played instead if Bashir was to play?
Well,
George, who would you have?
I'm playing devil's advocate because the answers that these two have just given are very reasonable. You know, they gave themselves 200 overs. It's a long time. You've got to give a lot of.
I think where it was, George. I think having been there, where it was slightly complicated as well. So they watered the pitch a day out because I think they knew that it was looking flat. So it was a big toss on the first day, which they then won and rolled Worcestershire, which I think was where Josh Davey came in terms of his selection. Because actually he wasn't used that much.
But Josh Davey didn't take a wicket.
No. But I think the reason they went, I would guess, I mean, obviously Bashir was also on loan at Morgan, but essentially the way that game played out, I think the way you had to win it was by winning the toss, bowling first, taking the wickets while it was green and a bit damp, and then being very well aware that you're going to have to bat once, bat big, and then take 10 wickets on what I think everyone knew was going to be a motorway. And there were interesting bits. Casey Aldridge, who I'd be surprised if isn't around England's thoughts as sort of like a similar Bryden Cast type figure. He ran up and hit Adam Hose on the toe with a big Yorker late on day 3. Took a really good 5 on day 1 actually when it was nipping around a bit, but like 5 genuine nuts as well. So they're interesting. I don't think they could have done much more whether they picked Shoaib.
Could they have retained Sonny Baker?
Well, I think they wanted to retain Sonny Baker.
So sure, but if they played him more.
I'm not sure Sonny Baker was ever fit to be played, to be fair. I don't think his lack of action at Somerset was massively down to anything other than sort of loads and misfortune and injury.
He's gone for opportunity though, hasn't he?
Yeah, massively.
We've just had
I don't know. Again, play devil's advocate, and there aren't necessarily yes/no answers to all these things. It does bother me a bit. I mean, I'm very pleased for Worcestershire that they battled, because I think it's going to be another tough season for them. But they did brilliantly last year. They obviously lost a player this time last year. They've lost another member of the club this year with John Curtis, a friend of ours, and their resilience is incredible. They deserve a huge amount of credit for that. So, brilliant. But I just wonder, from a Somerset perspective, it does feel like this is an opportunity this season. They've never won the championship, and actually, I think this might hurt them come the end of the year.
The Sonny Baker one is an interesting one. We've just had him on following on with Meeting Manners, and what a character that lad is.
What a guy.
I mean, what a character. We had 8 minutes of him. I could have listened to him for half an hour. He was fantastic. But Somerset, you would say, George, that missing link, why they've not won the championship on flat pitches in recent past is their quick bowler. I mean, Craig's done a brilliant job, Craig Overton, but somebody that can change the game. And if it's not,
they were expecting to have Matt Henry, weren't they?
Yeah, that was a blow. But the Shoaib Bashir one, I'm intrigued to see where this goes in the next 6 months with Shoaib, because it just seems. I said at the end of the last Test series, if he goes to Australia averaging 45 like he is now, or 55 he is now, then I'm not sure we can pick that lad. If he averages 35 and he's learning, then all of a sudden we've got the right trajectory going. He's gone to Glamorgan. He got 0 for 20. He got 0 for 92 off 22 overs in a game against Leicester. I mean, he's still young, but are England ready to make a call? Because there's a lot of other spinners who are knocking on the door. I can think of Carson as one, who I think is very, very good. Because if we're saying that Jack Leach has bowled 65 overs and not been able to win a game fourth innings against Worcester on a wicket which is turning, Shoaib Bashir has got 0 for 90 against Leicester. Yes, it's first game of the season. I'd be quite worried, because I said to Jon Norman and Jared Kimber last week, at this minute in time, I look at England and think they can only play four seamers now. With Ben Stokes' body, Shoaib Bashir not getting the volume of wickets or overs under his belt that he needs, England might have to play four seamers. And the spin bowler would worry me at this moment in time with 10 Test matches against India and Australia.
It's a really good point.
Let's just pick this up after the break. We're going to talk about John Curtis, who you just mentioned a few moments ago. We've got some very sad news, or you got some very sad news over the weekend. While we're in Sri Lanka, we'll pick up on Harmy's point. Is there a big option here or opportunity for a spinner in the England game? And where are we going to go with Shoaib Bashir, as well as continuing our roundup of all the action from Div 1 and Div 2 of the County Championship here on Following On County Cricketer. Let's pick things up then. You were just mentioning, Harmy, about Shoaib Bashir and the point that if he's not where he needs to be, England may go in with four seamers for the Ashes. I mean, your thoughts on that, George, Nick?
Well, I think Harmy's raises a really important question. You're so worried about Ben Stokes that you don't want to press him into service bowling too many overs. It's absolutely right. It feels that they're committed to a few people. Locked in tight but out of range is the expression I would use, who are, they've committed to them and they are now having doubts at the last minute, like every World Cup from Ghost of Christmas Past when they changed their wicketkeeper and opening batters on the eve of the tournament. Do they keep going with Ollie Pope? Do they keep going with all sorts of people? Zack Crawley? Do they keep going with Shoaib Bashir? From a Somerset perspective, if your spinners are bowling, two spinners bowling 115 overs in the fourth innings, and you've let supposedly England's premier spinner go on loan, I think you've got to scratch your head and wonder about that. Doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong, because we're talking about balance of the side, but it's one to look at. And obviously Somerset have done a lot right in that game. But Shoaib needs to get overs. That's massively important. Right now, I think Carson's a better off spinner. But they go to Australia. Look at the history of off spinners in Australia. It ain't awesome, is it? English off spinners anyway. Even Graham Swan, who was obviously a class above, had some real tough times there. So they're going to have to go and think about that. But I would just playing a seam heavy attack and relying on Joe Root or whatever to bowl spin. Don't know. That would be an error, I fear. But you've got to get the balance of the side right. There's a lot to ponder.
Can I throw two names out there, actually, I suppose. One with this winter in mind, and he's not as good a spinner as Jack Carson, but actually you could also look at that. I don't know where it quite fits in, but if there was a spin bowling all rounder they wanted to take with them necessarily, could be quite a big year. I mean, a potentially big year for James Coles if he has a good summer. He's been on the last two Lions winters.
He's not bowling. He's a very good cricketer.
No. He's not a frontline. He's very much a second spinner. No, he's very much a second spinner. But if it's about trying to find overs around a seam attack, then they obviously like him enough to take him over the lines. And if he scored enough runs, then whether he can sneak into that conversation, I doubt it. But it's just different ways of looking at it, I suppose. And the other one I'd say, this doesn't help for this winter, but I would wager that this time next year, the best England qualified spinner in the country will be Zafagoa, who will then be a 31-year-old, one-time Pakistan Test capped left-arm spinner playing for Middlesex, who will then be eligible for England. He's currently playing as a local. He qualifies this time next year. I've talked about him for about 4 years, to be fair. Only Simon Harmer has taken more fifers in county cricket since Zaffa made his debut for Gloucestershire. He's got 11 in 35 games now, that is, since 2021. Bowling at Bristol, which doesn't spin, is slow and low, and has now gone to Lords, where it doesn't spin, is slow and low. But nearly bowled into victory against Lancs yesterday, and he is so nice, like so good.
You could have him and Worrell playing for England, and then just
Well, I mean, this,
give
I'll
up on
come
county
down to this,
cricket.
but I interviewed him last week, for the cricketer at Middlesex Media Day, and he was very insistent. He didn't have to do much asking or probing. He wants to play for England. He qualifies next year when the time of elapsed since his last Pakistan cap, which was poor guy's played one test. It was in Christchurch, where, as he was very quick to point out to me, no spinner has ever taken wicket. I think New Zealand didn't pick a spinner, took 20 wickets for seam, scored about 800. He batted twice, got 70 odd, and was never picked again. I think it was when Misbah's last game as coach and selector, and was then binned off as selector, and he lost his place. But he's gone under the radar for a few years. Partly he's been overseas, partly he's been in, I suppose, like the bottom end of Division 2. Although he took 50 odd wickets when Gloucester were relegated from Div 1, he is really, really good, and people should watch him because it's not a dissimilar situation to where Worrell was, and that you've got a guy who's as good, if not better, than what England have in those areas, and you're approaching that position where everyone's a bit uncomfortable with what we think is actually the right answer once they become eligible, which is obviously where we are with Worrell and where we may well be a year down the line.
Where
I
did
don't
it
think
all-
England will pick Worrell. I don't think England will pick Worrell.
Go on.
I don't think they'll pick them. I don't think Ben Stokes will pick Dan Murrow. Much as I think Dan Murrow is a fantastic bowler,
For what reason, Harmy?
because he's played for Australia. Simple as that. I don't think Rob Key, Brendan McCullum, Ben Stokes will pick Dan Murrow.
And
Yeah,
to
I
be
know.
fair to Dan Worrell at his media day that George and I were all at, did kind of say he didn't think he was necessarily the right guy to be leading the attack in Australia.
Yeah.
He did. He said, how tall is he? I can't remember what the question was. The question was something like, is a 5'10", 80 mile an hour bowler the answer in Australia? And he said not. And I think he's a wee bit taller, but he's not expressed fast or anything. He's sort of early
It was very.
80s.
I mean, don't get me wrong.
He's a
He
good
was very
bowler.
much. He was
He was
very
missed this week. He was missed
No.
this week. He pulled out
Yeah.
on the morning, didn't he, of the Essex game? He was a big miss for Surrey this week.
Is that not a bit ironic? I mean, you've got a coach who was a great of New Zealand cricket. Obviously, Stokes, he was born in New Zealand, but lived there for 12 years. I mean, we live in a world where people move, travel.
England, Australia, George. Darren
Look, it would.
James Pattinson.
It doesn't sit brilliantly just because it suggests the England system isn't working as well as it should be. But if the guy, I mean, he seems like a decent fella, more than a decent.
Yeah.
He's certainly a decent bowler. I can see. My emotional response is that I would be reluctant to pick him, but at the same time, there are regs in place, and if he fulfills them and he's not a complete dickhead, which he isn't, then I would be inclined to just. England aren't that good that they can ignore really good cricketers.
Yeah, I get that. I get that.
Yeah,
The Africans, no problem with, but it's the Ashes and it's England versus Australia. And to walk into Perth first Test match with an Australian taking the first ball for England, who's already played for Australia, I think that would be a little bit of a bridge too far for.
McCullum's done it. Luke Ronke.
Yeah.
Let's talk about two games then from Division 1, which I want to get your views on. First off, where did it go wrong for Durham, Harmy?
Josh Tongue, brilliant.
Great
Both
game,
innings.
that. Really good
Yeah,
game.
that was a fantastic game. It's
Notwithstanding.
fair play to Durham because their run rate contributed to the game having a result conclusion. Ackerman batted excellent. Durham were trying to still try and win the game even in fourth innings. Pair of 116, 124 for Ackerman in that game. So he's let down. Durham didn't have the overseas bowler Doggett that's come in, didn't have Beddingham, but fair play. I watched a bit of the Josh Tongue spell and he bowled Durham out. And I think if you're team in first class cricket at the top end of Division One, if you've got a fast bowler that can take 3 wickets after between lunch and tea, or 3 wickets between tea and the end of the game on fourth innings, when the game is still petering towards a draw, you've got I can open a game up for you. That was good signs for England as well. I was really impressed by Josh Tongue. He bowled heavy, bowled 40 overs over the course of the 4 days. I was worried that I've always been worried about Notts. We talked about it the other week, John. I was worried about Notts that they would have enough, but they've got enough bowlers, but are they durable enough to put 7 games in 8 weeks together? But Pennington, Tongue, who was the other one that played?
Fergus O'Neill.
O'Neill, yeah, they've got a fiery attack, and on a good wicket, they can get good players out on good wickets because of their pace attack. But yeah, not to beat Durham. Yeah, an excellent 100 from James, but I thought Tongue was the difference between the two sides.
It was a very high start. I was there on day one. It was very high caliber, high standard game of county cricket. I think and there were only 4 test caps in it, but there were another 6 or 7 Lions. I think something like half of the what was it? I think there were about 7 or 8 players in that game who played in the Lions game against Australia A over the winter, because you also had Fergus O'Neill who played against them. You also had McKinney and Tongue, Pennington, Freddie McCann. Proper standard. It was hard.
Impressed by McCann. Very good.
Important for Notts to win as well while they've got that attack in place.
We're pushing the break again. Do you think this is something that was in my mind last week, actually, and kind of watching that Chelmsford game, or the Cruise Ambassador Line Stadium, or whatever it's called these days, and also the Somerset game as well. If teams are going to win the championship, they're going to have to be brave with their pitch preparation. No criticism, and I wasn't at either ground, so maybe it wasn't that flat at Essex, but that was an opportunity. When Surrey come visiting,
on the flattest pitch you've ever seen.
Yeah, and that's kind of the point. When Surrey come visiting, are these counties going to be happy with a draw, or are they?
No, I wouldn't put it like that.
Risk a win?
I wouldn't put it like that.
Somerset towards the back end of last season, and
no, but I don't think that was. I don't think that was being happy with the draw. I actually think teams have found that the way that Somerset are most susceptible is a pitch like that does take spin as the game goes on. They've not played Harmer particularly well ever. They take him at 1.5 and over, and and obviously the Somerset game last year was a bit of a blueprint for teams to beat them. I think you almost have to sort of try and neutralise their seam attack as best you can, but also may well be reading far too much into it. We've had 3 weeks of beautiful weather in April, which is typically the highest scoring month of the season anyway. There were draws everywhere. We've just been talking about Worcestershire batting for 200 overs on the last day to save a game. I wouldn't read an awful lot into that, other than that it was very flat, and that may well be because it's been bone dry since.
But Nick, on that front, just quickly before we break, in the last few years, I've noticed that the first 2 games of the season have always had the better pitches, and is that because the ground staff have had more time to prepare?
More time to do it.
So there's a sort of a memo to the scheduling going forward. The pitches are decent in April. So scheduling going forward, when people talk about 50 over competitions in the freezing cold and zipping about a bit, it doesn't. It's quite, them pitches are good. If you had all them pitches this week and you're playing 50 over games on them, I think you get very, very good contests. So I think when people talk about playing a meaningful 50 over competition at the start of the year, I think this week has proven that if you give a ground staff the right time and the right conditions, they'll prepare very, very good pitches. So from a scheduling point of view, I think we need to look at, because this is not an only incident. I think in the last sort of 3 years, first game of the season, there have been actually some very, very high scoring games, which tells you that if you give the ground staff a chance to prepare a good pitch, they'll get one. So maybe that is a message going forward.
The irony this year,
they were Kookaburra pitches, though, weren't they?
Yeah, but the irony this year actually is with the weather we had, with the weather around and how dry outfields were. you might just got a better game with the Kookaburra than you did last year. Not than you get with the Dukes, but actually these are kind of the conditions they want to use the Kookaburra in. When actually the ball isn't going soft and damp and actually where it is probably dry enough in a lot of those outfields by the look of it, you might have got a bit of reverse swing as it went on. Equally, it was flat as it was, and the Kookaburra I think is pretty well placed with where it is this year in late June, July, if we get similar weather to what we've got now. But
you are listening or watching, following on county cricketing. George, we received some really sad news over the weekend. Tell us a little bit about John Curtis, a friend of yours who passed away, and a guy that you'd only seen just a matter of days before we flew off to Sri Lanka.
Oh, he was a gem of a man. Everyone will tell you that. He had a fantastic career as a journalist, be very respected around our profession. So he wasn't a columnist; he was an agency guy. So he did the sort of rigorous journalism without necessarily having the strong opinions that get you the attention of the general public. But as a journalist, he was PA's football guy for many years, so he'd been all around the world, all the top tournaments, and ingratiated himself with, just charmed everyone he met, really. England managers used to pop into the press box and say hello to him. Like I remember Graham Taylor doing it a couple of times, but also people like Stephen Gerrard. You wouldn't necessarily expect these people to want to say hello to journos, but he was such a nice man, and there was sort of an innocence and an enthusiasm about him as well. But the real thing was he loved cricket, and when he had sort of retired from that top level football journalism, he came back to Worcestershire, where he had operated the scoreboard as a boy, and worked for both the club and doing a lot of, again, agency stuff around it. And everyone loved him. I mean, he made the press box such a joy. He was a fantastic mixture of fun, energetic, humble. He was a joy, and sadly he became ill a year or so ago. Had a nasty fall where he broke his hip about 2 weeks ago. But as you say, I saw him in hospital. Yeah, a couple of 3 or 4 days before he died, I guess. And he seemed fine. He seemed okay. He seemed he was recovering. Just to put it in perspective, I know that Gilo, bless him, went the next day. It was Mothering Sunday when he went, so it must have been the Saturday I saw him. A couple of days later, he took a turn for the worse and died. Very, very sad.
Well, sorry to hear that, matey. I mean, we were together in Sri Lanka when the news came through. I know how much it affected you. So thoughts with his family.
Well, it was lovely that Worcestershire wore black armbands, and they named the press box after him, Mike Beddoe and Chris Oldnall, who are sort of 3 terrific journalists. 2 of them have died, sadly, now since they named it in September. But it's really nice. I mean, clubs don't always appreciate that side of things. They don't always appreciate the media, but we're all cricket lovers, and it's great that Worcestershire appreciated those guys, and him in particular, and lovely that they wore black armbands in this game. And he'd have been so pleased, I hope he is, that they battled and showed all those attributes we know that they had last year. And I'd like to think he was watching down and enjoying that.
Well said. It's difficult to segue from that to back to cricket, but we do have a couple of other games just to round off, and we have already covered Worcestershire, of course. By the way, Brian Lara, when he hit that 501 on was it day 4 or day 5 of that? Was it
Day 4?
Day 4. He had to play in a Benson and Hedges semi-final the next day at the Oval, which was a little bit crazy. If only the Nick Friend of 1994 version would have been up in arms and writing a few thousand words about the scheduling problems that county cricketers faced.
Hey, it was wrong then, and it's wrong now.
You almost sounded like Geoffrey Boycott then. You went a bit Yorkshire. Yorkshire lost, by the way. Hampshire, what are your thoughts on that? Hampshire win? I mean, the Johnny Bairstow captaincy eras got underway. Underwhelming stuff, bowled out for 121 in the first innings, and they never really recovered, did they?
Can I ask a question on that before we do? Why didn't John Turner play? Is he injured?
No, he's not injured, I don't think.
Jesus
squad.
Christmas.
Yeah, they picked Baker over him. I think they picked
I'd
Baker
imagine
over him, didn't it?
I'd imagine Baker, and they're both on ECB development deals, aren't they? So I suspect they've got their games managed, and it wouldn't surprise me if they're going to play kind of the same
Alternate
games
games,
very rarely together. Would be my
It's just we've been talking about him. He's not that young, actually.
no, and he'd like to play more,
Mm.
as he said. George, you tweeted something on the back of an interview I did with him in March, and you sort of talked about the loan deal. I think he'll get his chances, but it was interesting. I know it's the age-old conundrum for England in any Ashes year, but if you think of the guys who are sort of in and around that group, they've lost. So Ollie Stone, it sounds like he'll be missing till August. John Turner didn't play that first round. Josh Hull wasn't fit for that first round. I thought it was one of the ironies actually of watching day one at Trent Bridge was I know Neil Colleen was there and Luke Wright was there and Josh Tongue was bowling, Dylan Pennington was bowling, and the bloke nicking off everyone was Ferguson Neal, an 80-mile-an-hour, 6'4" Australian. But I think Sonny Baker is great fun. I'm fascinated to see how he goes. Brilliant talker about Harmy. If you had him for 8 minutes, you should sit down with him. He'd be obsessed with you as well. He's got a thing that he's I mean, you might already have done this, but I've interviewed him a couple of times. He told me about he's reached out to like great fast bowlers over the years, like people who
He's got a black book or something.
got a black book of
That's
them
what
all,
he said. He's got a black book.
but he's called people. He's called I can't quite remember who, but I want to say like Brett Lee, Sean Tate, these kind of guys. Just basically said, "How'd you do it? Tell me how you do it." He's really interesting because he didn't always want to be a cricketer. He wasn't particularly good at sport growing up. He was right on the fringes of Somerset's age group stuff as like a 17-year-old. Had a couple of stresses, and but has been clocked at 92.5 mile an hour playing in that T20 competition that Hampshire were involved in over the winter, the Global Super League, on his debut. And he's properly obsessed with bowling fast.
And he got Johnny Bairstows out twice.
Yeah, and the second one was a good. The first one was a big old pie, but second one, big nipped in, knocked his middle stump over. He's fun, and it would not. And if he's fit in 9 months' time, which is obviously the challenge for any of these quicks, I think all bets are off with where he ends up at the end of this year.
I think Yorkshire a little bit of they've got 3 senior players in Blythe, Milan, and Bairstow. And I like the Bairstow captaincy. I think that's the right thing for Johnny, to motivate Johnny and try and give Yorkshire the best of Johnny Bairstow. I didn't mind that decision, but they've got a lot of young players in and around that. So I think you're going to see Yorkshire. Yorkshire could get beat off if you let's be fair, the bottom end teams are that could be struggling, and Yorkshire could be one of them. They could lose to the bottom end teams and then go and beat Essex or Surrey. I think it'll be an up and down year for Yorkshire with the young players they've got and where they're at. I just worry that Yorkshire haven't got that quick bowler in the first division that I think they need to contest with the sort of top the higher end. But fair play to Hampshire. Fair play to Hampshire. They deserve to win that game because I think they had the best game plan going forward. And you look at Hampshire, and I worried about Hampshire because replacing James Vince in first class cricket, I think he was irreplaceable. I just wonder, Mark Stoneman at the top of the order, he's not going to get the runs that Vince has got and a volume of runs, but the stability that Rocky gives, and if he gets them off the good starts, then Hampshire can feed off that from a confidence point of view. So I'll be interested to see where they're both these sides end up in at the end of the first round of 8 games.
Really interesting to see how Tom Press goes as well, because he's kind of the Vince replacement in that middle order, and he's about as close like a Vince prototype as you could probably as they could produce. Like he's really good, and he's young, and he saw them home basically. Got a big 50 when they were 80 off the 4, I think, in that run chase. Another one on the Yorkshire side, actually, one of the young guys that Harmy talks about, James Wharton's an interesting one worth watching. He's 6'4", proper like big strong batter, but really nice player who used to be like a proper route obsessive. Did like model everything on it to the way he picked up his bat and little triggers and quirks to the point that 80 yards away it looked like Joe Root was batting. But he's kind of found his own way now and is Ended last season with 280 odd. Nice player. I was surprised he wasn't on the Lions tour, but one to watch this year. Also potentially the one who falls out of the side whenever route and book available, but worth keeping an eye on.
We're going to wrap up for Division 2. We've not really spoken about it. You're listening to Following On County Cricketer. Let's talk about Division 2. You know, as soon as anything good or bad happens, it is sent around social media as quick as I complete the sentence. And Zack Crawley's dismissal, I think, had us all talking and gasping. Within 16 minutes, was it? Nick will know. 16 minutes of the start, 16 deliveries of the start of the county championship season, and he loses Midland off. We were watching it in Sri Lanka, weren't we, George? Trying to work out what went wrong, where it went wrong. But Kent won. Kent won. So, you know.
Well, Kent won, but Leicester and Derbyshire won in 3 days.
I know. Crazy, eh? Good old
Kent
Mickey Arthur.
Kent won by 145 runs, having the highest score of 231. I mean, it didn't look the greatest games. I mean, I must admit, I seen that Zack Crawley one. I mean, unfortunately for Zack, his head wasn't even in the right position for a right arm away swinger, never mind a left arm swing bowler back towards the stumps. But he got a few runs in the second innings. Adam Hollyoak got off to a winning start. Northampton looked as though they're in a bit of trouble there. I mean, what did they get? 140 and 110, 60 for 2 players in each innings. Nobody really performed well them. But yeah, Keith, is it Dudgeon?
Dudgeon, yeah.
Yeah. What story that is. Yeah. Joe Root telling Zack Crawley while on SA20, this kid's a bowler, and he couldn't play last year, and he got 10 for in first game. So, you know, hopefully for Kent, because they have had a struggle recently. Hopefully for Kent, the Adam Hollyoak factor will work down there.
What do you do with Zack Crawley? Because he does play fast bowling
brilliantly
really well. He's got, I mean, he plays fast bowling unusually well. If the ball is just coming quick on old-fashioned Aussie wickets, he is your guy. But if it moves laterally, he really isn't.
George would argue that if you look at the first division of the county championship and you look at the teams, like Nick said earlier, being at Durham, if he was opening the batting for Durham against Pennington, Tongue, O'Neill, you'd think he's in the game here. You fancy Zack to get a few. But playing in the second division on wickets, which are doing a little bit because they're trying to get out of the second division into the first division, is Zack the one that's going to be sort of falling between the cracks and not, you know, putting himself under even more pressure by not getting runs because the actual second division doesn't suit him? It sounds stupid.
But he didn't. But last year he got a big double hundred against Somerset. But if I remember correctly, that was surrounded by a bunch of single figure scores. I think he got. It was his only.
Once he gets past 70, you think he's going to get 300.
I agree with George. I kind of think England's obsession with Australia at all times, and cycles being Australia to Australia, kind of mean that they're in so deep with Crawley at the moment that there's no point in dropping Zack Crawley now, because this is not the first time. If he didn't get any runs in this first block of Champo games, it would not be the first time he's had a poor round Championship games, which is why his first class average is around 30. The reality is they're in so deep with him because they fancy him on Australian pitches, and they're going to Australia. It does feel like he's probably the player with the most to lose from that Australia series. In that if they go over and it goes badly, he doesn't score runs, then you kind of go, well, new cycle and all that, because that's what England do. And you'd think if the regime changed, let's say potentially, and the approach changed, you'd think that someone that inconsistent would be an obvious fall guy for that. I find it really hard with where we are now in 2025. It sounds strange to say on the back of the run he's had going back to Matt Henry in New Zealand and such things. Like, I just don't see why you would move on from Zack Crawley now, because they've stuck with so long.
Because you're worried that the pitches in Australia and the balls are not quite the same.
No, I get. Don't get me wrong, I get that, but the whole plan does appear to have been around building.
Show Bashir and Zack Crawley.
Bashir, Crawley, the fast bowler program. It's all about how do we win Australia. And they decide that is how you win. And Mick Lewis, actually, the New York's bowling coach, the old Essex bowling coach, the old Australia bowler, spoke to Nick Howson, colleague of ours, on the cricket.com a couple of weeks ago, and he was big on saying this is not how you win in Australia right now. It's nipping around. The ball's never done more. he's a massive Sam Cook advocate. He's working with like the likes of Ben Code now, and was talking about how he wants to get guys like bowling like Sam Cook, and um, the warning signs are there. You know, the data has shown that it's nipping around more, all those things. Someone like Ferguson O'Neill, found interesting watching him at Trent Bridge, and actually he's not rapid. He's 6'4". He was bowling around 76, 80 mile an hour. Granted, he just got off a plane, but he was the one nicking everyone off in the first innings. So, yeah, you know, is there the warning signs are there?
But the thing is, if you're gambling's not really my world here, but if you're gambling and you keep losing, and they're gambling on Shoaib, Crawley, and Pope, and you think, my luck's got to turn, I'm not sure that's smart. You know, that's keeping going on a fruit machine because you've lost lots.
Yeah.
And you think your luck's about to turn.
And the
You know,
percentage.
look, I'm absolutely not saying they should give up on any of them, actually. But we're talking about Zack Crawley, aren't we? I absolutely see the positives. He has got the eye of an eagle. He can play fast bowling very, very well, unusually well. He can't play the moving ball. Can't. And we saw that, and it was a bloody good ball that bowled him. And, you know, if a bowler gets through the gate like that, but it was quite a large gate. You could have put stone pillars each side of it.
I reckon a good number 10 would have played it exactly the same way, if not a little bit better. That was the thing that stood out to me, where eye-opening straight away. I was like, wow, yes, it was a good ball.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, it was a good ball. I'm not taking anything away from young Guthrie. But this was a delivery to an international opening batter. If he inside edges it, first game of the season, onto the stumps, you'd say a little bit hard luck. If it hits his front pad, you say, yeah, a little bit of hard luck. Just got caught on the crease a little bit because it's the first game of the season. But to miss it by the distance he missed it, the head position that Zack unfortunately was in, like I said right before, a right arm seamer bowling away swingers, you'd expect your head to go across off stump. You wouldn't expect it to be that far across off stump facing a right arm bowler. Never mind, technically against a left arm bowler, you're staying a little bit more towards the leg side and letting the ball come back in towards you, especially early on. It just looked horrendous, and it comes back to, you know, like we said, talked about, the gamble of all their eggs are in one basket with England. You know, the fast bowler's a spin bowler, and 1, 2, and 3. I think number 1 sorted. I think Duckett's fine. The 2 and 3 would concern me a little bit.
Guys, we'll talk about this next week, no doubt. We've got to wrap up the show. Rota Watch is back. Nick, where are you going to be for round 2, the county championship?
Oh, I sort of said half
joking. 4 grounds.
Well, I kind of said as half was a joke, but now potentially as an idea that I would try and get round all 18 teams in the first block. And I've now managed 6. So
what you've managed? Oh yeah, I suppose. Yeah,
we get 3. Yeah, I actually had Saturday off to run ground force day at my club.
You had a Saturday off, and you still managed 6.
I went to, I mean, not 3 grounds, 6 teams.
Yeah, but even so,
Yeah.
that's anyway. Yeah, great.
Yeah, but weird. I'm doing Friday, so part of this slightly doomed mission. I'm doing Friday at Bristol to watch Gloucestershire v Glamorgan. I'm doing Sunday. It's Passover. Passover begins on Saturday evening, so I'm not working Saturday. Sunday, I'm also not working apparently, but I might. Who knows? You might see me at the ground. And then Sunday is that day I've just mentioned. Monday, I'm at Surrey v Hampshire, so I'll be 10 teams in.
George?
I haven't decided, but I'm at Leeds imminently to talk to Harry Brook.
George, according to our rota,
I'll see
you
you.
are going to Nottinghamshire v Essex.
I was thinking of taking a week. I need to take some holiday again. I thought I might nip to Dambulla for 2 days. I might nip to Greece for 2 days. I was thinking actually of watching Cambridge United on Saturday because they're involved in a relegation miracle. Actually, is what they need, but they keep keeping hope alive, and so I thought I might do that instead.
Sounds good. I wish I was at Craven Cottage yesterday rather than last weekend. That was a good 17 minutes for my team. What about you, Harmy?
My football season's over from the reporting point of view. All my games now are live on our channel. So I'm done from a football season point of view. I'll be Durham on Friday, Durham, Warwickshire. Charlie will be training. So while he's training, he trains 3 till 6 with the academy now. So I'll be.
Yeah, we didn't even mention that, Harmy. I mean, I've known for a few weeks, but
He didn't have the best of times in his first game on Sunday. He got whacked a bit, but now he's now fully fledged on Durham's academy, and they train. Well, we live an hour away, so when he goes to training, I mean, in the winter it was torture. I mean, they were training for 5.5 hours, so just sitting watching through the window was, in the freezing cold, was torturous. But now the cricket season started. Friday, while he's training, I'll be watching Durham, Warwickshire, the last 2 sessions.
And isn't your niece part of the women's?
Niece is in the women's team's academy as well. So, and they train at the same time. So me or my brother-in-law takes one, and the other one goes and picks them up. So it's a little bit of an added bonus, that, but it's great to see Eva. I tell you what, I've watched a lot of probably watched more of the women's team, Durham's team, train over the winter, and they've worked really, really hard. I mean, watching Danny Hazel and the rest of them, they've worked really hard. So I hope when the women's game starts that they get off to a good start, because the Durham girls have worked really, really hard. So Collie's daughter's in with the academy as well, and my niece is in there as well. So son's with the boys' academy, and nieces with the girls' academy. So flying the Harmison name still with Durham 20 years later.
Durham women have also recruited better than anyone, I reckon.
Yeah. Well, they had to.
Well, yeah, of course, they did literally start from scratch, but fun squad, proper. You can tell a lot of thoughts going into it. You can tell Marcus North did a very good job last summer, I suppose, in talks with players on the fringes of England, Filer, Armitage, Villiers, Bess Heath, Emily Windsor is an experienced batter. They'll be good.
Didn't we have a theory that Susie Bates was going to Durham?
Your theory. Feel free to elaborate.
That would be
Have you heard that, Harmy?
I've not heard that.
Well, you've heard it here first.
Heard it here first. That'd be a good sign. Fair play to Northie. They've started from scratch, but he's as all the attention. You look at the men's game. I think there's been quite a lot of attention from Marcus North pushed into Durham got their business from the men's point of view out before the end of last summer. Rhodes was done, Gary was done. Who didn't have the best weeks. I'm sure he'll get better from that. But I think because of that, Marcus North could concentrate heavily on getting the women's game sorted for when they first start. You can start from afresh, and hats off to him and Tim Bostock, because I think they've put a hell of a lot of time and effort in getting this Durham women's team, not only as a relevant county, but I think it want to be watched as well.
Brilliant stuff. Thank you, chaps. I'll be at the Oval on Friday and looking after my kids for Easter holidays on Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. But we'll be back on Tuesday and released to the podcast or YouTube. But for now, thanks for listening or watching, following on County Cricketer.